KPBS On Demand is supported by Markel Design and Remodeling, helping homeowners with their home remodeling needs. From ADUs to kitchen remodels, room additions, and custom homes, Markel Design and Remodeling can help homeowners design and build their dream homes. More at trustyourhometous.com.
Well, get on with it, girl.
My name is Wendy. Wendy Moore Angela Dawn.
Wendy's enough.
Oh.
Through a modern lens, Disney's 1953 animated version of Peter Pan sounds painfully dated. But this year, Peter Pan gets a fresh reimagining that allows Wendy to drive the story.
Tell Mama I'm just staying a little longer. And tell her that I'm being wild as hell.
Wendy, come on!
Filmmaker Benh Zeitlin revisits James M. Barrie's children's classic for his new film, Wendy.
Come, Wendy. I'll teach you to fly through the sky.
Welcome to another edition of listener-supported KPBS Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Accomando. In 2012, transplanted New Yorker Benh Zeitlin made Beasts of the Southern Wild, a fierce and beautiful cinematic poem about a culture on the verge of extinction and defiantly staring down the challenges that accompany that. The film used non-professional actors that Zeitlin told me helped shape the script. It's been 8 years since Beasts of the Southern Wild, but Zeitlin is taking the same approach in his new film, Wendy. The film opens in a contemporary cafe that exists perilously close to a train whose whistle seems to lure wild children to escape their mundane existence.
All children grow up, but some, the wild ones, escape.
The train proves to be Peter Pan's means of gathering new companions. Zeitlin co-wrote the film with his sister Eliza. He recalled how their wish as they blew out birthday candles was always that they would never grow up. Now they get to tackle that idea by retelling the Peter Pan story and using Wendy to investigate the true nature of aging. Or as he says in his director's statement, not the changes to our bodies, but the erosion of the spirit that happens only when joy, wonder, and hope are lost. How could we grow up and never lose our freedom? This question became the guiding force for what became a 7-year journey to Wendy. I need to take a quick break, and when I return, I'll have my interview with writer-director Benh Zeitlin.
KPBS On Demand is supported by Splatero, helping homeowners pay off debt by offering streamlined access to your home's equity with no additional monthly payments or new debt. Splatero provides a lump sum payment in exchange for a share of your home's future value. Pre-qualification is available at splatero.com.
First of all, what attracted you to wanting to reimagine a Peter Pan story?
I think a lot of things. I think it was a story that particularly for me and my sister had been part of our personal mythology since we were really small children. I think that I did a play of Peter Pan for her when she was 2 years old, with stuffed animals and like zip lines flying into a puppet theater. And, it was like a story that we retold to each other and less than kind of like actually retelling the real story of Peter. It was really about, kind of these characters sort of stayed with us and these ideas and kind of this sort of central theme of, what can be lost when you grow up and sort of going from children being sort of kind of terrified of that loss, always kind of dreading like that somehow we were going to lose some part of ourselves that we can never get back in the process of growing up. And then I think as we got older, I think more, reflecting on some of the sort of the theme that really kind of we reconnected with the story with when, at the point where we decided to make the film, was kind of this idea that's kind of in the text that I think continued to sort of terrify me even as an adult. That there's this kind of idea that in order to be truly free, you have to be alone and you have to be kind of heartless and really unconnected to other people. And I think it's something that I think everybody really confronts at some point, is this idea that in order to grow up, in order to, have, pursue the dreams of the work you want to do or the career you want to have or the family that you want to have, that there's this kind of sacrifice of freedom and wildness and joy involved in getting those things. And I think we wanted to explore the notion that that doesn't have to be a choice that you make, and that that there can be tremendous sort of joy and freedom and wildness within love, within sort of family, within kind of the path to getting older. And we sort of wanted to tell a story, not through the lens of Peter, who sort of is just this tiny little zealot for never grow up, but through the sort of lens of Wendy, who is this kid who goes to experience this sort of adventure and this freedom, but then also has to leave and go back and face life and sort of take that with her and figure out what to do with it and how to sort of confront these losses and not be broken by them.
Your film's arriving at the same time that a play here is opening, also reimagining Peter Pan, called Fly. What do you think about this story has given it such longevity and kind of inspired people to reimagine it repeatedly?
I imagine it's something that a lot of artists connect to. I think especially when your path in life is impractical, which most artists' paths are. We are trying to live for storytelling and imagination. And as you get older, there's quite a lot of pressure, I think, for creative people to sort of compromise their vision and their dream of what they might do and who they might be, and to conform to more practical paths that lead to more financial stability or whatever, lead to that are safer or more stable. And I think that, there's something in the experience of growing up as an artist that I think probably that I certainly connected to the conflicts and the themes within the mythology of Peter, and then I'm sure a lot of other people do too.
Your first film, Beasts of the Southern Wild, had a kind of social consciousness regarding climate change. This film has a really interesting kind of ecosystem to it. I mean, when the trains are going by, what you're seeing is not like this beautiful, pristine landscape. And when they get to the island, too, there's trash washing up on the beach. So I'm wondering what kind of themes you were trying to get at with that.
I think it's a couple of things. I think that we really wanted the film to sort of celebrate a connection to nature, even if it's not like a pretty and perfect one. We wanted to sort of celebrate something that was more visceral, and the film was. We went to enormous lengths to film to make the movie, on a real island in the real rainforest. Like, we shot on an active volcano. We shot in beaches that were sandstorms and oceans and underwater, and we tried to always really shoot the film like truly in connection with nature, and we wanted to tell a story about sort of childhood adventure that wasn't sort of like synthesized and built in a computer, and that really had that visceral contact with muck, for lack of a better word, and we also wanted to sort of thematically talk about how that changes. I think that one of the losses that I think we experience, like going from being children to adults, is our sort of visceral connection to the planet shifts in a way. I think when we're young, your contact with whatever it is, dirt, bugs, dead things, sand, water, like those things don't feel disconnected from you. You can just sort of be a part of them, and then we slowly learn to not touch things that are dirty and not get germs, and and as we get older, and I think something that changes, as you become an adult, is people really start thinking about how to use the earth to benefit them and to make their lives more convenient, and oftentimes that's a very destructive force. And I think that those themes are ones that we wanted to play out in the movie. And so, you're often seeing the world of adults, or as sort of the sort of perfect world of the children fades, it gets invaded by refuse and things that aren't natural. And that sort of, those are two sort of parallels in the film, two sort of distinct worlds in the film. One that is very much like entirely untouched nature, and one that is, much more sort of corrupted by the adult world of garbage and construction and ways in which that we use natural resources to try to live more comfortably.
Talk a little bit about the process that you make films. It's been a long time since, I think it's been like 8 years since Beasts of the Southern Wild, and you really kind of invest in these films, finding children who aren't professional actors and going to locations that are not necessarily the easiest to get to. Talk a little bit about this process you go through creating these films and how they evolve.
I think we're always looking for ways to make larger than life things feel very, very real and figure out where does Neverland exist on this earth? Where is the planet at every bit as sort of awe-inspiring and exhilarating as sort of like the fairies and the mermaids of the original Peter Pan, or like what experience would be as thrilling as flight, as exists in the original Peter Pan. And so, I think both with sort of where we shoot the film and also looking for, actors who connect to these characters, we're looking for people and places that just have like a spirit that connects to an idea and connects to sort of an emotion that is central to the story. And those things we sort of prioritize those things over acting experience or accessibility or practicality of shooting somewhere. We try to really commit ourselves to this idea of using the real thing as much as possible and hopefully bringing like a real sense of reality to a story that has always been sort of far away magical land that is really a fairy tale. And hopefully this is a very different way to kind of think about the ideas in the story in ways that they actually can feel realistic.
Talk about how you wanted this location to look, because you shot on an island off of Antigua.
Yeah, well, on Antigua, Barbuda, and on the island of Montserrat.
And kind of convey a sense of what you wanted this film to look like from shooting there.
I think we wanted to really take the audience, to a place that is both larger than life and also actually exists. And we wanted to shoot, we didn't want to construct Neverland. We didn't want to sort of build sets, and we wanted to find an actual place that sort of spoke to these ideas that have, been associated with Neverland. And so we found this incredible island called Montserrat that has an active volcano on it, and that 2/3 of the island are a exclusion zone where, that have been evacuated. And so you have a whole sort of region that is incredibly naturally diverse. There's rainforests and cliffs and beaches and these sprawling ash fields that look like the moon, and then an active volcano that's, pouring sulfur. And it's all sort of in a very compact, small space. You could stand in one place on the island and see all of those things as you turn around in a circle. And so we really wanted to kind of convey this experience of this island that has these radically different feelings and landscapes that the children in the film are traveling through rapidly, and that the different populations in the film inhabit and then sort of express sort of different emotional worlds of the movie.
One of the things I think you do really well in this film and also Beasts of the Southern Wild is this sense of kind of exhilarating movement where you combine, it's the cinematography, it's the editing, it's the music, it's the kids running, but there's this sense of like such joy in just the physical movement of it.
Yeah, I think it's something that I always like. It's something that I always want to capture, which I think is one of the hardest things to capture on film, is just pure joy and pure freedom, because everything about how films are conventionally made works against that. You have, generally on a film set, you're there thinking about time, money, very specific angles and places that you can shoot, and there's like 100 people there and everybody's under pressure, and it's the least liberated feeling work environment that you could possibly imagine normally. And so one of the huge challenges to me always is to find a way to sort of take apart that conventional culture of a film set and create a place where the circumstances are such that you can actually have fun, especially for these kids that are actors in our films. Like, if they can't come to set and be wild and have fun and express that part of themselves, it prevents them from being able to truly bring themselves to the performance and do the sort of acting that we're looking for. And so, it's always a goal of mine to sort of not have the culture of my films feel like this incredibly structured, oppressive place, but to allow room for spontaneity, for unexpected things to happen, for chaos. And, that all makes things more difficult to accomplish on a filmmaking level, but it does allow for this emotion of freedom and joy that I think is very, very rare and hard to capture in the context of a movie shoot.
That was a clip from the trailer for Wendy. I need to take one last break, and then I'll be back with the rest of my interview with filmmaker Benh Zeitlin.
KPBS On Demand is supported by Splatero, helping homeowners pay off debt by offering streamlined access to your home's equity with no additional monthly payments or new debt. Splatero provides a lump sum payment in exchange for a share of your home's future value. Pre-qualification is available at splatero.com.
Now, neither one of these films, I think people would think of offhand as being kind of like creature features or monsters, but both of them have these kind of magical creatures that are present. Does that come from some sort of fascination you have or something that influenced you?
There's probably a couple things. I do think I have, I think a huge influence early on. When I first started thinking about this movie with my sister, we were probably 5 years old in my parents' basement watching our VHS tapes of Willow and The Princess Bride and E.T. and these films that have this incredible creature work, never-ending story. And I think that those characters stayed with us forever. Some of those sort of larger-than-life creatures, are kind of the strongest points of memory for me, just remembering what made me fall in love with the magic of movies. And I think that kind of combines with just a real love for animals and interest in how we relate to animals and animals relate to us, and just an important feeling that I wanted to express in the film, and that I think children know and that adults lose, is just that we're not different, that we are also creatures on this earth. We're also animals, and that we're not separated from them actually in the way that we start to behave later in life. And I think that for kids, both films are sort of told through the lens of children and how they see the world, and this connection that children have to animals, this empathy that they have for them, and sort of understanding the world as they relate to other creatures is something that just really fascinates me, and something that just kind of organically emerged as important elements of both of these little girls' psychology that are at the center of the movie. That there's this animal that they seek to understand. In one case they're afraid, in one case they're trying to protect it, but they become incredibly important emotional touchstones for the children in both films.
And in this film, the creature is referred to as Mother, and I think that kind of emphasizes your whole notion of this connection to nature, and you can't help but think of Mother Nature when you see this creature.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think one of the main things that we wanted to really sort of just one of the main things that we wanted to reimagine in the Pan myth is really the attitude and the approach to motherhood that it takes. There's this sort of idea in the original story and in the idea of Wendy that she's sort of brought to be the mother of the Lost Boys, and what that means in almost every iteration of the tale is that she is kind of on the sidelines, and she, stays at home while the boys go on an adventure, and then she tucks them into bed and fixes their clothes, and and that's what it means to be a mother. And we really wanted to destroy that notion and completely transform it, both in sort of who Wendy is. We wanted to give her agency and power and strength and bravery, and we wanted to sort of show that there's no inherent reason why motherhood doesn't mean that you're not also wild and free and brave. And in this story, in this film, motherhood is it's the most sort of monumental superpower you can have, and that exists both in the character of Wendy and in Wendy's mom at home, and also in this sort of earth goddess of mother who is the protector of these children, and also sort of the source of joy and the protector of joy in the world.
What do you think you get by working with these non-professional actors, these children who aren't on a career path to a Hollywood stardom or something? What do you feel that you get from these young kids?
I mean, you learn so much about the reality of the experience they're trying to capture. I think that it was fundamental to us that the most important thing in casting each of these kids, and really even the adults in the film, was that we wanted people in this movie who if Peter Pan came knocking on their window, they would absolutely run away. And there's a certain look in a kid's eye. There's a certain mischief. There's a wonder. There's a curiosity. There's a spontaneity. There's just like a wildness. We talk about like the ones with the light in their eyes. And, that look and that quality is something that we didn't feel like we could synthesize in an actor that young. And if you're and the age we wanted these kids to be, if at 6 years old you're already on a career path, like that isn't those aren't the kids that are going to jump out the window and run off, necessarily. And so we wanted that sort of real wildness and real sort of like children whose first job is to just be a child, to be what populated this movie. And I think that was both, to give it this sense of joy and spontaneity on screen, but also, for us as adults who have lost so much of that feeling and that wildness to spend years with these kids and really do so in a way that we were learning from them, that we were collaborating with them on their characters, so much sort of wisdom of what it means to be young and what it feels like to be staring down growing up, from that moment, was learned by me and my sister from our actual cast who were in the film.
Your films feel very unique, but do you feel that there were any filmmakers that influenced you or that kind of inspired you to go into filmmaking?
Yeah, and I think kind of from two very different worlds. I think that the films I talked about earlier, I think that movies sort of cemented this place in my imagination at a very young age, and it was in kind of big Hollywood films, that I had on like child protected VHS tapes in my basement growing up in the 80s and early 90s. These big fantasy films like E.T. That just had such a big role in sort of teaching me what it meant to be good, what it meant to be bad, what a hero was, what a villain was. You so much of your sort of like sense of morality and what's right and wrong in the world can come from movies like that. And I think that films like that sort of have drawn me towards kind of telling, working with mythology and working with stories that are like larger than life. And then, I think later on, as I got introduced to a lot of documentary filmmakers like Les Blank or narrative filmmakers like John Cassavetes, I also equally admire sort of people that really strive to bring a sense of realism and performance and really study the complexities of people and relationships. And, for me, I've always had a real interest in trying to find a way to sort of make those two worlds connect, and sort of bring together, what would be considered like a more, art film, sort of cinema or language, and sort of connect that with stories that feel sort of universal and iconic and timeless.
And I understand you shot this on 16 millimeter?
Mm-hmm.
And what prompted that choice?
I think a lot of things, it's sort of the medium I learned filmmaking working with. That it has, one of the sort of principal things that we wanted to do in this film was to be able to shoot in almost 360 environments, which allowed the kids to be much more free, which allowed us to be much more spontaneous on set, sort of reblocking movement and, just sort of improvising on the fly. And, one of the great things about 16 millimeter is it can really hold up under some pretty radically different lighting conditions. And so, when you're working in incredibly arduous environments, way far from any power outlet, on the water, just in places that are full of things that could fry a hard drive. There's actually, I think, an incredible freedom in working with an analog capture medium, because you can really be liberated to move the camera around and sort of point and shoot without also hauling out a mountain of equipment to control the light, or a mountain of electronics to sort of capture all of the footage digitally. And so it's sort of counterintuitive, but in some ways, obviously there's things about film that are still harder. We were like, we had to fly people with cans of film to America to get it developed every single day. And there were immense logistical challenges to working on film, but in terms of just having freedom on set to be able to shoot and be spontaneous and be kind of lightweight and agile, shooting on very small 16mm cameras actually gives you some things that working with digital cameras don't allow.
It looked gorgeous, I have to say.
And it looks beautiful.
Yeah,
That's
too.
the other advantage.
Do you have any plans for your next film? It seems like there's a large gap between movies for you.
Yeah, always. I mean, I didn't actually stop working really after Beast. I mean, I spent a year promoting it and then really went directly into working on this film. It just, and Beast took 5.5 years, and sort of the process that I've used on both films is very unconventional, and it just takes longer than a film that was made in a more straightforward way. So, my plan is really to sort of, as soon as we're done working on sort of getting Wendy out into the world, I'll be back home and started on the next thing right away.
And you are essentially an outsider to both of these environments that you've looked at in your films. You're not from Louisiana, and you're not from this area of the Caribbean. You're a New Yorker, correct?
I've lived in Louisiana for 15 years, but
okay.
I'm a native New Yorker.
No, I was just wondering if outsider eyes give you a different view of some of these places.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they do. And I think it's a part of filmmaking that I really love, and that I enjoy the most is kind of really a way to explore the world. And, it's an amazing, I never sort of show up in places where, in a place where I'm interested in shooting with a camera or a crew or a script or anything like that. I really tend to travel by myself and take a really long time to, get to know people, find collaborators locally. And one of the great things about movies is it's an incredibly universal art form, and people are inherently interested in being a part of a movie and telling a story, and sort of collaborating in that way. And so it's really, I find, just an amazing art form in that way, in that it's so universal and so many people can be a part of it in so many different kind of ways that, it's always been an amazing experience to me to go to a place where I obviously don't belong. And, as I meet people, say, I'm here to tell this story and I'm interested in telling it in this place, and I'm looking for people to help me figure out how to do it. And I've met sort of, some of my greatest friends, and just sort of, you build incredible worlds. Anybody that worked on Wendy could go back to Montserrat, in the apocalypse and ride it out for the rest of their lives. Where it's like we formed a family and a home there that lasts forever, and those are some of the most rewarding things about doing this work.
Well, I want to thank you very much for taking some time to talk about Wendy.
Absolutely, thank you for talking to me about it.
I hope it's not that many years before your next one, though.
Me too.
All right, thanks.
So we'll see what happens.
That was filmmaker Benh Zeitlin. His new film, Wendy, opens on March 13th. Thanks for listening to another episode of Cinema Junkie. If you enjoyed the podcast, please tell a friend and help me grow the audience. You can also leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Till our next Film Fix, I'm Beth Accomando, your resident cinema junkie.
KPBS On Demand is supported by Markel Design and Remodeling. helping homeowners with their home remodeling needs. From ADUs to kitchen remodels, room additions, and custom homes, Markel Design and Remodeling can help homeowners design and build their dream homes. More at trustyourhometous.com.